Hey guys, tonight we step backward not just centuries, not just millennia, but an almost absurd distance around 1 million years ago. You crouch on a patch of dirt in East Africa, the ground cracked with dry season sun, the air carrying the smell of dust, sweat and the faint musk of animals that roamed before names were ever given. In the distance the silhouettes of hominins, our distant ancestors, move carefully between brush and boulders, their stone tools clinking faintly. One female drags a scavenged haunch of antelope, while a male follows with eyes as wary as a hawk's. This is no date night, no candle-lit dinner, this is survival on a knife edge, and the customs around sex, courtship and reproduction are raw, simple and brutally honest. You think you might not survive 5 minutes here without getting trampled by a hippo or bitten by something with too many teeth, but for them this was just Tuesday. Tonight's story will trace how sex itself, our instincts, habits and awkward negotiations developed from the very start. If you've ever wondered why humans kiss, why jealousy exists, or why marriage contracts became a thing, the answers start here, in the heat and dust of prehistory. So before we go further, hit that subscribe, tuck in tight, and maybe post in the comments where and what time you're listening. Are you in New York at midnight, drifting off after work, or somewhere in Delhi in the bright morning sun, sneaking in history with your chai? Drop it below. I love seeing where this sleepy caravan travels. Now close your eyes, we're moving through deep time, across a million years of survival and improvisation, through the earliest sparks of what eventually became, well, us. This is the complete history of sexual customs, and it starts right here, with creatures who looked almost like us but weren't quite yet. You shuffle closer to a group of Homo erectus, our ancestors who stood tall, walked upright, and made tools sharper than your last kitchen knife. At this point in history, somewhere between 1.5 million and 800,000 years ago, the question of who paired with whom wasn't solved by roses or chocolates. It was about strength, food, alliances, and sometimes sheer persistence. Unlike chimpanzees, who advertise fertility with bright signals, or gorillas, whose silverback rules with raw dominance, Homo erectus seemed to be carving out something different. You notice that females do not advertise estrus. There are no flashing signs that scream fertile now. This concealment, oddly enough, may be the beginning of long-term pair bonds. If a male couldn't know exactly when a female was fertile, the safest strategy was to stay close, invest time, bring food, and guard against rivals. Congratulations, you've just invented the prehistoric version of sticking around after breakfast. As you linger, you realize this is the dawn of sexual division of labor. Males with their greater body size tended to hunt or scavenge dangerous game. Females often gathered, carried infants, and processed food. These roles weren't rigid, but they shaped how attraction itself worked. A male who returned with meat wasn't just feeding the group, he was advertising reliability, strength and perhaps sex appeal. A female skilled at gathering or nurturing infants displayed endurance, patience, and the ability to raise offspring. These weren't Tinder profiles, but they were signals carved directly into survival itself. You step closer, careful not to make a sound. A small group clusters near a fire. One male struts, chest forward, holding a heavy stone axe. He glares at another male, across the flames. The second male doesn't back down. There's tension here, sexual competition. Anthropologists would call this mate guarding and intrasexual rivalry, but to you it looks like two tired men fighting over who gets to sit next to the same woman. Eventually one bares his teeth and throws a rock, and the other slinks away. Conflict settled. For now, you don't clap. Applause hasn't been invented, but you can't help thinking you've just watched one of the earliest versions of alpha male behavior. Yet unlike gorillas or baboons, Homo erectus didn't operate in harems where one male monopolized all the females. Fossil evidence suggests groups were too complex for that. Instead they lived in small bands where alliances mattered more than brute strength. If a male hogged all the females, he risked the wrath of other males who could band together. Cooperation limited the extremes of dominance. What you're really watching is the embryo of our later monogamy and polygamy systems, messy, negotiated, constantly in flux. A joke for you, imagine trying to swipe right in this era. Instead of loves dogs hates drama, the profile would read, good at not dying when lions attack, brings meat sometimes. No hyenas spotted near my fire yet. Honestly, better odds than most modern apps. As the night deepens, firelight flickers across faces that resemble yours, but with heavier brows and broader noses. You notice something subtle, pair bonds forming not just for sex, but for child rearing. Infants are slow to mature, helpless for years. A mother alone couldn't easily raise one while also gathering food and avoiding predators. A father who stuck around meant the infant had a better shot at survival, and so, a custom takes root, not formal marriage, not vows, but the expectation that sex wasn't just a momentary event, but a link in a longer chain of care. This might be the birth of social monogamy, though not perfect fidelity. Straying certainly happened, sneaky liaisons when others weren't looking, but the social glue of a pair bond, even if temporary, offered stability. A female could count on help, a male could guard against rivals, and the group, as a whole, benefited from reduced chaos. Now let's zoom out for a moment. 1 million years ago, sex was never private. It happened in view of others, in tight-knit groups where everyone knew everyone's business. Privacy as a concept didn't exist. Survival did. Customs reflected that. Pair bonds were negotiated through food sharing, grooming and proximity, not whispered vows. Adultery wasn't a sin, it was a logistical problem. If two males fought too much, the group fractured. If one female was abandoned, her infant might die. Norms therefore formed, not from morality but from sheer necessity. But even here in the dawn of humanity, you sense the first stirrings of culture around sex. Look at the ochre-stained rocks nearby. Some hominins dabbed themselves with pigments, perhaps to signal fertility, identity, or simply to look striking. Maybe it was the earliest makeup, applied not with Sephora brushes but with sticky fingers. Attraction, it seems, has always had its props. Another observation: laughter. Yes, even here. When one male tries to impress a female by carrying a massive branch, only to stumble and fall face first into the dirt, the group erupts in grunts and chuckles. Humor, even then, may have played a role in attraction. Who knew slapstick was 1,000,000 years old? The night grows cold. You watch the group huddle close, men and women, infants nestled in arms. A pair curls together near the fire, their closeness not just about warmth. Sex, here, is woven into survival, bonding and the promise of tomorrow. They don't call it love, they don't need to. And as you fade into sleep, you realize, the earliest sexual customs weren't about taboos or laws, they were about figuring out how to live long enough to pass on genes. Yet in those dim firelit faces, you see the first sparks of the rituals, jealousies, and longings that would echo down all of history. You wake to the scent of wood smoke, the scratch of tall grass against your ankles, and the buzzing of insects that don't seem to respect personal space. The year is somewhere around 60,000 BCE, though of course no one here is counting. The sky glows faint pink before dawn, and you are walking among small bands of hunter-gatherers, the direct heirs of those Homo erectus you watched last night. Their bodies are lean, their skin daubed with dust and traces of ochre. Their eyes glance sideways at you, alert and suspicious, because life is still fragile, and outsiders are rarely welcome. Yet if you linger quietly, you notice something strange. Their courtship, their flirtation, their sexual signaling is no less theatrical than a nightclub dance floor, just without the disco ball. Here in these roving groups, sex is no longer purely about survival bargains around meat and infants. It has become a performance, a declaration, and sometimes a gamble. You see it in the ochre streaked across foreheads, in beads strung from animal teeth, in tattoos scored into skin with bone needles. These adornments are not just decoration, they are signals. In a world without written language, a necklace of shells says I traveled far, while a painted body says I am fertile, strong, or desirable. The first great sexual signaling emerges in color. Red ochre, ground into powder and smeared onto skin, was used by groups across Africa and later the Middle East. Archaeologists still find it in burials tens of thousands of years old. Why red? Because it echoed the flush of blood, the heat of arousal, the unmistakable vitality of life. You might smile at the idea that lipstick has a 100,000-year history, but you wouldn't be wrong. You watch as a young woman kneels, rubbing ochre across her cheeks while others watch with interest. She isn't hiding what she's doing, she's broadcasting, and across the fire, a young man notices. He tilts his head, straightens his back, and begins to hum a rhythm, slapping a stick against a hollow log. Music, too, becomes part of the dance. Attraction isn't just visual anymore, it's auditory. Beats, chants, and laughter are stitched into the fabric of sexual customs. Soon the group gathers for what you could only describe as a proto-dance. Feet stamp, hands clap, and voices rise in sharp calls. Bodies move in unison, but here and there, you notice pairs forming within the rhythm, partners stealing glances, moving closer, drifting away. This is more than celebration, it is ritualized flirtation. Instead of violent fights over mates, attraction is negotiated through art, song, dance, paint and display. You might call it the very first Saturday night party, though no one's charging a cover fee at the cave entrance. But don't imagine everything is equal and romantic. Behind these displays lies the ever-present reality of competition. One man dances with confidence, his arms strung with shells from distant rivers. Another tries to mimic him but stumbles. There are other signals too: scarification, ritual wounds healed into permanent patterns on the skin. For some groups, these scars became badges of maturity, fertility, or bravery. To you they might look like painful tattoos. To them they were declarations: I have endured, I am ready. Every cut etched into skin became a line in the silent language of attraction. The customs around sex are not just about individuals, they are about alliances between families and groups. You hear murmurs, well, grunts and gestures more than words, that suggest marriages are arranged not only for love, but for survival. A young woman might be paired with a man from a neighboring band, sealing a fragile peace. Her body, her fertility, becomes part of a larger political calculus. These unions aren't optional. If you refuse, you risk being cast out, and exile in this world is a slow death sentence. Yet among the rigidity, there is fluidity. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer descendants today find customs of trial marriages or visiting partnerships. Couples form temporarily, testing compatibility. If it works, the bond strengthens. If not, they part without shame. Even here in prehistory, sex is not just one thing. It is a spectrum of strategies, an array of experiments. You lean in and realize, humans have always been flexible, adapting sexual customs to whatever kept the group alive. And there's another layer: myth and ritual. Around the fire, elders tell stories, gestures and chants that link fertility to the cycles of the moon, to the migration of animals, to the coming of rains. Sex becomes sacred, tied to cosmic rhythms. When women bleed in time with the moon, it is no coincidence, it is power. Ritual dances reenact fertility, men mimicking animals, women raising arms like branches sprouting fruit. These performances are not merely entertainment, they are cosmology woven into design. A joke for you: imagine explaining this to a modern audience. Why are you painted bright red? Because it makes me look more alive. Honestly, not so different from why someone tans before a date or adds that Instagram filter. Fashion, it seems, is timeless. You notice that privacy, again, is absent. Couples do not retreat to locked rooms, they drift away into the grass, but the group knows. There's no shame in being observed, no sense of bedroom secrecy. Sex is a public fact, not a private confession. Customs reflect that. Fidelity is loose, affairs common, jealousy managed through ritual fights or redistribution of partners. It's not that people didn't care, it's that survival left little room for rigid morality. Still, jealousy burns. One night you see it unfold. A young man notices his partner laughing with another. He storms across the firelight, yanks her arm, shouts. The group intervenes, pulling him back, calming her. Conflict simmers. Tomorrow maybe the partnership is broken, maybe repaired, but the lesson is clear. Even in loose systems, emotions run hot. Sexual customs have to manage not only desire but also envy, betrayal, and reconciliation. Let's pull back again. Across continents, evidence paints a consistent picture. Shell beads in North Africa, birdbone flutes in Europe, ochre burials in the Middle East, all hint at sexual signaling tied to art and ornamentation. Attraction isn't only about biology, it's about creativity. A man who can carve a bead or play a tune shows more than skill. He shows patience, intelligence and flair, qualities that translate into survival for his partner and children. You might say that art itself was born as a sexual custom. The first love song was also the first survival strategy. And yes, there's grooming. Sitting by the fire, one woman picks carefully through her partner's hair, plucking lice. You might shudder, but in that gesture lies intimacy, care, and attraction. In many species, grooming is foreplay. For us, it laid the foundation of comfort, the trust that says, I'll scratch your back, literally, and you'll stay. As the stars wheel overhead, the group curls into sleep. Couples lie close, children sprawled between them, elders snoring at the edges. Tomorrow, they will travel again, carrying tools, ochre, beads, and the weight of unspoken customs. You drift into thought. What you're watching is not just biology but culture. Every painted cheek, every scar, every rhythm on a drum is a language of sex, written without words. And in that language, humans began to define themselves, not only as creatures who mate, but as creatures who seduce, signal, negotiate and remember. Customs became memory, memory became tradition. A million years from this moment, people will still paint, sing and dance to attract each other, and they will still stumble awkwardly, still blush, still laugh when someone trips in front of their crush, because some things never change. The night sky fades into a pale blue, and the sound of bird calls draws you out of sleep. You are no longer in the world of roaming hunters alone. You're standing at the edge of the Neolithic, around 10,000 BCE, when humans began experimenting with farming, permanent villages, and with them, new sexual customs. The air smells of wet clay and tilled earth, smoke from cooking fires curling upward as goats bleat nearby. It feels calmer here, less desperate than the chaos of pure foraging. But as you soon discover, stability brings with it not just comfort but new rules, new restrictions, and new ways of managing desire. Sex, once woven fluidly into daily life, now becomes tethered to fields, property and kinship lines. Crops need land, herds need protection, and suddenly who sleeps with whom determines not only survival but inheritance. A child is no longer just another mouth in the band, it is an heir to land, livestock and labor. You realize with a shiver that sexual customs are about to become more codified, more regulated, and sometimes more suffocating. Imagine a small village of mud brick houses clustered by a riverbank. Families sit together, grinding grain, storing barley in clay jars. A young couple, eyes bright with attraction, sneaks glances across the courtyard. Their desire is genuine, but their fate is not entirely in their hands. Parents, uncles, and elders loom nearby, whispering about dowries, alliances, and the need to connect this household with that one. Suddenly, sex is no longer just about ochre-painted signals, it's about contracts. This is the dawn of arranged unions. A daughter may be promised to the man whose family owns the neighboring fields. A son may be married into a clan that boasts better tools. The pair may have no say, but the custom is clear. Sex is embedded in social order, in the balance of power between families. You shift uneasily, realizing that intimacy has become an institution. But institutions need rituals, and so fertility, once whispered around fires, now erupts into public ceremonies. You watch villagers gather near a shrine made of stone pillars, their tops carved with animals. Offerings of grain are poured, fires are lit, and men and women dance around them, stamping feet into the dirt. The ritual isn't simply a party, it is a demand. Let the crops grow, let the animals multiply, let our women conceive. In their minds, the fertility of fields and wombs are one. To neglect the ritual would be to risk famine. You notice figures of women carved in stone and clay, the famous fertility figurines, broad hips, rounded bellies, heavy breasts. They are not portraits of individuals, but ideals. They embody abundance, continuity, the power of reproduction. Some are buried in fields to bless the harvest, others placed in homes to guard pregnancies. These figurines whisper of a custom where women's bodies were venerated as sacred, even as they were often controlled by patriarchal systems emerging in the same moment. And the men? Their role is celebrated in symbols of bulls, rams, and other virile animals. Horns become signs of potency, of male fertility. You chuckle to yourself, horned helmets and bull symbols will later fill entire mythologies, but here in 8000 BC, they are the earliest sexual metaphors carved into stone. But let's not romanticize too much. Alongside reverence came restrictions. With permanent settlements, rules about adultery and faithfulness sharpened. Why? Because if property and inheritance mattered, paternity suddenly mattered too. A husband needed assurance that the child inheriting his land was his own, so customs emerged, watchfulness, punishments for straying women, sometimes the seclusion of wives, men's jealousy, once a passing quarrel, hardened into law. You can almost hear the sighs of women across millennia, trapped in arrangements where fidelity became less about love and more about keeping the barley fields in the family. Yet for all the control, cracks appear. Secret liaisons continue, affairs whispered in shadows. Archaeologists find stories in myths later written, that of women sneaking lovers, of gods disguised as strangers seducing mortals. These tales may preserve echoes of real frustrations, the rebellion of desire against rigid customs. Even in 6000 BCE, human hearts refused to be neatly boxed in by contracts. Let's step inside one of these mud homes. The floor is cool beneath your feet. Rush mats spread across it. A couple shares the space, their child sleeping in a cradle made from reeds. The man's tools hang on the wall, the woman's grinding stone sits in the corner. Their intimacy is practical, woven into daily tasks. She prepares food, he sharpens a blade, and later they curl together against the cold. Love exists here, of course, though it may not always match the arrangements made by elders. What matters most is continuity. Children to till fields, guard herds, and carry traditions forward. A joke for you: imagine if Neolithic people had a dating app. Profiles might read, "Owns 6 goats, can carry 50 kilos of barley without complaining. Swipe right if you want stability, swipe left if you want to starve." Honestly, better odds than most modern bios. But sex isn't just about family anymore, it's about cosmos and gods. Early farming villages believed that human fertility mirrored the fertility of the earth. Seasonal festivals often included rituals of sacred union, sometimes symbolic, sometimes acted out by chosen couples. These rites, later remembered as sacred marriage, joined men and women in ritualized sex meant to ensure crops grew and rain fell. To you it feels both awkward and awe-inspiring, intimacy elevated to divine duty. The customs deepen. Menstruation, once managed quietly, now acquires rules. Some groups see menstrual huts, spaces where women retreat during their cycles, both isolated and revered. Pregnancy becomes monitored by charms, amulets, and birth, always dangerous, is surrounded by ritual midwives, who recite words to protect mother and child. Customs wrap around every step of reproduction, binding sexuality not just to survival but to spirituality. Yet, in the midst of this seriousness, joy still exists. You witness laughter around the fire as young people tease each other, songs with playful innuendos, dances that leave cheeks flushed. Humans, even when wrapped in rules, find ways to flirt, to joke, to lighten the weight of obligation. It's comforting to realize sarcasm and innuendo are as old as agriculture. And then, as you drift further into this world, you see the beginnings of gendered labor shaping gendered expectations of sex. Men, tasked with plowing fields and herding animals, are associated with strength and virility. Women, tied to hearth and fertility, are associated with nurturing and reproduction. These associations harden into expectations, and expectations into customs. A man's worth is measured by land and herds, a woman's by womb and children, yet in practice, both bend these rules. Archaeological evidence shows women hunting, men tending crops. Customs may dictate one thing, but reality, as always, is messier. Night falls, and a festival begins. Torches light up the dark, shadows dance across stone walls. People gather in circles, singing chants to honor the moon. At the center, a pair enacts a symbolic union, cheered on by the group. The custom is more than spectacle, it is a promise that life will continue, that desire, ritual, and survival are forever entwined. As you lean back, staring at the flickering fire, you realize that sexuality has shifted from a private negotiation between two individuals to a stage on which entire communities perform. Fertility figurines, sacred unions, arranged marriages, all of them emerge from the same soil, the same grain, the same goat herds. And in that soil lies the seed of something that will dominate history for millennia: the control of sex, not just by instinct, but by society, ritual and law. You close your eyes, imagining the hum of cicadas, the smell of wet earth, the laughter of young lovers sneaking away behind storage jars. Here at the dawn of agriculture, you see the birth of customs that will ripple forward: marriage contracts, fidelity rules, fertility rites, all from the simple fact that humans for the first time decided to stay in one place, and in doing so bound sex to land, law, and legacy. The air shifts again as you step forward through centuries. The dust of Neolithic villages settles behind you, and before your eyes rises something far grander: cities, temples, and the very first civilizations. The year is somewhere around 3000. You're walking down a packed mud street in Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. The smells overwhelm you: roasting grain, dung from tethered donkeys, the sharp scent of bitumen used to seal canals. People jostle past in linen tunics, baskets balanced on their heads. And here, in the bustle of the first cities, sexual customs have grown into institutions tied not only to survival and farming, but to gods, kings, and written law. Marriage, once a matter of kinship and crops, is now written on clay tablets. The Code of Ur-Nammu and later the Code of Hammurabi lay down rules about fidelity, inheritance, and punishment. You peek at one tablet as a scribe carves cuneiform into wet clay. If a wife is caught in adultery, she and her lover may be drowned. A harsh sentence, yet revealing. Sexual customs are no longer negotiated by families alone, but policed by the state. Sex has become law. But alongside this rigidity, you stumble upon something surprising. The temple looms ahead, ziggurat steps reaching into the sky. Within, priests prepare offerings, and beside them, women adorned with jewelry and painted eyes stand ready. This is the sacred marriage ritual, where the king symbolically unites with the high priestess of Inanna, goddess of love and fertility. Their union, whether enacted physically or performed symbolically, was believed to ensure the land's abundance. In this moment, sex is divine theater. Desire and politics fuse, airs, harvests and heavens linked by ritualized intimacy. You step closer, the air heavy with incense. Musicians play lyres, drummers beat time, and the crowd chants. The ritual is not private, it is communal spectacle. For the people watching, the act assures that their wheat will sprout, their herds will multiply, their city will thrive. In their eyes, sex is not something to hide, it is sacred duty, cosmological alignment. You realize how different this feels from later prudishness. Here, sexual customs are celebrated openly as part of worship. But not all customs are joyous. Laws carve strict roles. Women in Mesopotamia are bound to their husbands, fidelity enforced with severe penalties. Men, however, may visit temple prostitutes, whose roles were not stigmatized but sanctified. Still, ritual abounds. The Egyptians revered fertility deities like Hathor and Min. Festivals in their honor often turned bawdy, with songs full of innuendo, processions carrying giant phallic symbols, and revelers drinking beer until inhibition melted. To modern eyes, it might resemble a carnival. To them it was holy release. The customs here remind you, joy and sexuality were not always suppressed, they were celebrated under divine protection. But darkness lingers too. Incest, taboo in many later societies, was normalized in the royal houses of Egypt. Pharaohs married sisters and daughters to keep divine bloodlines pure. For commoners, this was unthinkable. For kings, it was necessity. Customs bend under the weight of power. You imagine the palace halls, torchlight flickering on gilded walls, while whispered unions played out in chambers, justified as divine duty. A chilling reminder, customs are often less about morality and more about maintaining control. You shift again, now among the ruins of early Hebrew communities in Canaan. Here, sexual customs are reshaped by emerging religious codes. The Hebrew Bible prescribes strict laws around adultery, incest, and purity. Marriage becomes covenant, sanctified by God. Fidelity is demanded, not just for inheritance but for spiritual obedience. Customs here entwine sex with sin, marking a stark shift from Egypt's playful festivals. The notion that sexuality itself must be regulated by divine command begins to take root, and that seed will shape millennia. A quick joke before things get too heavy. If Mesopotamians had dating profiles, they'd read, "Looking for someone fertile, must enjoy long walks on irrigation canals, preferably not already promised by contract." Tablet N47. Egyptians, good at eyeliner, owns property, can sing bawdy songs at festivals. The competition was fierce, and clay didn't even allow for flattering filters. But returning to seriousness, you notice a pattern. As societies grow larger, customs around sex grow stricter. Why? Because with property, inheritance, and lineage at stake, rulers and priests need order. Jealousy becomes law, contracts become sacred, and intimacy becomes ritual. The chaos of free flirtation in hunter-gatherer camps is replaced by the weight of scribes, temples and kings. Yet cracks remain. Love poems, secret liaisons, fertility festivals, they all whisper that desire never fully bows to authority. Even in the shadow of ziggurats and pyramids, humans find ways to laugh, to flirt, to love against the rules. As night falls over Mesopotamia, you imagine the city humming. Lovers whisper behind reed walls, priests chant before statues, scribes scratch laws into clay, customs swirl together, rigid contracts, sacred unions, joyful festivals, harsh punishments. This is not one story, but many, woven together into the fabric of the earliest civilizations. And as you lean back, staring at the flickering light of oil lamps, you realize that sexual customs here reveal something profound. Humanity, for all its inventiveness, has always balanced on a knife's edge between freedom and control, between passion and law, and the struggle between those forces is only just beginning. The desert air thins, the night breeze cools, and you find yourself walking not among the mud-brick alleys of Mesopotamia but through the marble colonnades of ancient Greece. Around 500 torches line the agora, casting long shadows on philosophers debating endlessly about virtue, while nearby, wine jars are being hauled toward a symposium where music, laughter and more intimate encounters will unfold. If Mesopotamia tied sex to law and Egypt to ritual, Greece ties it to civic identity, philosophy and art. Customs here are contradictory, elevated to the realm of gods yet acted out in ways that often shocked outsiders. You pass a temple to Aphrodite, goddess of love. Offerings clutter the steps. Figs, honey, little bronze figurines of women and men in poses that leave little to the imagination. Sexuality here isn't hidden, it's written into religion, sculpture and theater. Yet, just around the corner, stern citizens warn of immoderation, urging restraint and self-control. The Greeks perfected the art of saying one thing while practicing another. Marriage in Greece is straightforward, often practical. Fathers arrange unions to secure alliances and dowries. Athenian girls marry young, often in their teens, to older men. The wedding night is less a personal choice and more a family affair, designed to produce legitimate heirs to inherit land. A bride brings with her a dowry, textiles, slaves, or coin ensuring her stability if widowed or divorced. Fidelity is demanded of women, but for men, expectations are, shall we say, flexible. For Greek men, sexual customs are not confined to their wives. Symposia, elite drinking parties, often included hetairai, educated courtesans, skilled in conversation, music and lovemaking. Unlike wives, hetairai could move freely, converse openly and influence politics. And then there is the matter of pederasty, the custom that baffles and disturbs modern audiences. Older men, often citizens of status, formed relationships with adolescent boys, who in turn gained mentorship, gifts, and social standing. These bonds were celebrated in art and poetry, framed as a fusion of education, affection, and desire. Outsiders, especially later Romans and Christians, would condemn the practice, but within Greece it was defended as part of civic culture. For the Greeks, sexuality was tied less to gender and more to roles, active versus passive, dominant versus receptive. Who penetrated mattered more than who was penetrated. To you it feels alien, a reminder that sexual customs are never universal but shaped by culture's quirks. A joke for you: imagine explaining this to a modern friend. So my mentor helped me with philosophy homework, and also other things. Your friend would probably back slowly out of the symposium, but in Athens, this was status. Customs, like fashion, have their seasons. But let's not reduce Greece to scandal. The Greeks also gave the world some of the earliest erotic literature and art. Vase paintings show scenes of courtship, flirtation and desire. Poets like Sappho, from the island of Lesbos, wrote tender verses to women, her lines shimmering with intimacy. Sweet mother, I cannot weave slender, Aphrodite has overcome me with longing for a girl. Through her we glimpse same-sex love, not as anomaly but as natural, celebrated, poetic. Sexuality in Greece is entwined with mythology. Zeus transforms into a swan or bull to seduce mortals. Aphrodite rises from the sea foam, patroness of passion. Even tragedies and comedies brim with innuendo, playwrights joking about oversized phalluses and wayward desires. Customs are reinforced by story. If gods behave this way, how can mortals resist? Cross the sea now to Rome, where marble forums hum with trade, politics and gossip. Romans inherit Greek customs, but twist them to suit empire. For Roman men, masculinity is measured by control over slaves, wives, and lovers. Like the Greeks, they care less about gender than about dominance. A freeborn Roman male is expected to be active, never passive. To submit is to lose status. Marriage in Rome is both contract and performance. Brides wear saffron veils, carried in procession to their husbands' homes. Fidelity is demanded of wives, their reputations scrutinized relentlessly. Husbands, however, wander freely, visiting slaves, prostitutes or concubines. The double standard is glaring, yet rarely questioned. Roman law enforces chastity among women because property and inheritance must remain clear. The Emperor Augustus even passes laws punishing adultery, trying to shore up traditional family values while quietly keeping mistresses of his own. Hypocrisy, it seems, is an eternal custom. In Rome, prostitution flourishes. Brothels line city streets, signaled by lamps and paintings of available acts. Slaves are sold for sex, their lives bound entirely to the desires of masters. For the elite, Concubines offer semi-formal partnerships, recognized but not equal to marriage. Custom stratifies sexuality by class. What is acceptable for a senator is not the same as for a slave. Yet Romans also revel in erotic art. Visit Pompeii before Vesuvius buries it in ash, and you'll find walls covered in frescoes of lovers, gods, and positions catalogued like a menu. Phallic charms dangle over doorways, believed to ward off evil. Sexuality here is not hidden, it is painted, carved, displayed in daily life. And still, love slips through the cracks. Roman poets like Ovid write of longing, seduction, and the art of love. His Ars Amatoria offers tongue-in-cheek advice. If she resists, kiss her still, she will grant what she resists. To modern ears, it sounds troubling, but in his time, it was witty guidance for flirtation. Customs reveal both creativity and cruelty. You notice that both Greeks and Romans conceptualize sex, not as private emotion but as public duty and display. A man's sexuality reflects his citizenship, his control, his role in the republic. A woman's sexuality reflects her family's honor, her husband's property, her fertility. Love, desire and joy exist, yes, but always within the scaffolding of law, myth and power. And yet even here rebellion stirs. Lovers meet in secret gardens, women pen verses to forbidden companions, men risk scandal for affairs. The tension between order and passion, between custom and craving, is alive and sharp. A little levity. If Romans had dating profiles, they'd boast: senatorial rank, owns vineyard, great toga collection, active not passive. Swipe left if you don't like public baths. The sheer confidence would put modern dating apps to shame. As the night deepens over Athens and Rome, you reflect. Sexual customs here are dazzlingly complex. Sacred unions, harsh double standards, poetic celebrations, bawdy festivals. They reveal a truth we've seen before and will see again. Sex is never just about bodies. It is about power, identity, and meaning. Civilizations rise and fall, but desire keeps weaving itself into law, art and life, never fully tamed, never fully free. The torches of Rome flicker out behind you, and the scent of Mediterranean wine gives way to incense, sandalwood, and the heavy perfume of jasmine drifting from inner courtyards. You're stepping into India, China and the wider East Asian world somewhere between 2000 BCE and 1000 CE, where sexual customs are layered with philosophy, ritual and centuries of evolving dynasties. If the Greeks saw sex as civic duty and the Romans as law and power, here it becomes a path toward cosmic balance, household stability, and sometimes outright pleasure turned into philosophy. You find yourself in a small chamber lit by butter lamps. On the floor lies a manuscript, its palm leaves bound by string. A man carefully copies verses from the Kama Sutra, a text that will later be misunderstood in the West as a mere catalogue of exotic positions. But as you glance at his work, you see it's much more. It is a guide to living, to love, to household harmony, to sensual delight, to the etiquette of marriage and the art of seduction. For Indians of this period, sex is not shameful. It is one of the four pillars of life, alongside duty, prosperity, and spiritual liberation. The Kama Sutra instructs not only on intimacy but on conversation, grooming, and courtship. Women are advised on how to assert themselves in choosing partners, men on how to please and honor their lovers. In its pages, sexual customs appear as balanced negotiations, not just male-dominated rules, yet reality, as always, is more complicated. While elite classes might practice the text's ideals, many women lived under patriarchal restrictions, their sexuality bound to arranged marriages and caste customs. The ideals shimmer, but the lived experience could be harsh. Step into a courtyard during festival time. Garlands of marigold hang from doorways, drums pound in the streets, and couples steal moments behind curtains. Fertility rites are common. Statues of Shiva and Parvati honored, lingams bathed in milk, songs sung of union that echoes both spiritual and physical love. For many, sexual customs are tied not only to pleasure or family, but to the divine play between gods and goddesses. In myth, union is sacred drama. In life, it becomes ritual to ensure crops grow and households thrive. A joke for you: imagine if someone in the West today told their partner, "Don't worry, this is not just intimacy, this is dharma." You might get an eye roll, but in India, sex truly was considered a part of the moral order of the universe. Now journey east to China, where the scent of tea wafts through courtyards, and silk rustles as courtiers bow before officials. Here sexuality is framed by Taoist philosophy, where yin and yang, female and male principles must harmonize. Manuals advise that men should not squander their essence, semen, recklessly, while women's energy is seen as restorative. Sexual customs become entwined with health. Balanced union prolongs life, unbalanced drains it. This isn't superstition alone, it's a worldview that treats intimacy as medicine. In practice, this philosophy shapes court life. Emperors consult manuals on managing their harem, selecting which concubine to visit, not just for desire but to maintain cosmic balance. Records describe elaborate schedules, sometimes to the point of absurdity, with officials tracking which woman is chosen on which night to ensure fairness and fertility. To you it looks like bureaucracy invading the bedroom. To them, it is statecraft wrapped in silk sheets. Concubinage itself is a custom deeply embedded in Chinese society. Elite men, especially emperors, kept multiple women in their households, each ranked and regulated. A primary wife held official status, but concubines might wield hidden influence, especially if they bore sons. Power and sex intertwined. An emperor's legacy depended on heirs, and heirs depended on the women chosen. For the concubines, life was precarious. One day, they might bask in favor, the next, they could be dismissed or forgotten. Behind the silken curtains, passion mingled with fear. But not all customs were confined to palaces. Among common people, arranged marriages flourished, often negotiated by go-betweens who matched horoscopes and family fortunes. Weddings were elaborate affairs, red silk, feasts, rituals to ancestors. A bride left her natal family to join her husband's, her sexuality subsumed under duty to continue his lineage. Fidelity was demanded of her. For men, again the standard bent. Cross the sea to Japan, where Shinto shrines dot the landscape, their torii gates framing forests and streams. Here sexuality is less stigmatized than in later imported moral codes. Early Japanese customs celebrated fertility through rites like the Kanamara Matsuri, honoring phallic symbols as protectors of health and crops. Erotic shunga art flourishes centuries later, showing lovers with humor and exaggeration, treating desire as natural and sometimes comic. The boundary between sacred and profane blurs. Sexuality is part of life, not hidden behind shame. Meanwhile, in Southeast Asia, customs blend Indian, Chinese, and local traditions. Stone carvings at temples like Angkor depict celestial dancers, apsaras, their flowing forms embodying seduction as divine performance. Ritual unions between rulers and priestesses mirror the sacred marriage of Mesopotamia, but with local myths. Everywhere you look, customs root sexuality in cosmology, turning desire into a reflection of universal harmony. Still, restrictions exist. In Hindu India, caste dictates marriage choices, forbidding unions across boundaries. In Confucian China, filial piety demands chastity from widows, who are expected to remain loyal to dead husbands. In Japan, samurai culture idealizes male bonds alongside rigid expectations for wives. Customs swing between celebration and control, as always. And yet, joy persists. Lovers still write poems, paint secret letters, sneak away during festivals. In India, women pen verses in palm leaf manuscripts about longing. In China, scholars exchange erotic quatrains with courtesans. In Japan, pillow books record witty observations about the pleasure of touch. Sexual customs here are as much about creativity as about law. Another joke for you: if Confucian parents had a dating app, every profile would begin, respectful of elders, able to produce sons, knows proper bowing angles, swipe left if you can't recite the Analects. Honestly, probably fewer matches than you'd think. As you rest under the curved roof of a Chinese tea house, listening to the chatter of merchants and courtesans, you realize that East Asian and Indian traditions share something in common. They treat sexuality as both cosmic and practical. It is medicine, ritual, family duty, divine drama, and personal joy all at once. Unlike the rigid laws of Mesopotamia or the double standards of Rome, here sex is more fluid, philosophical, sometimes playful. You open your eyes and the painted scrolls of Asia blur into parchment, ink and the stern chants of prophets. The air now smells of burning incense mixed with dust from desert winds. It is somewhere between 500 BCE and 800 CE, the time when Hebrew, Christian and Islamic traditions rise and begin reshaping sexual customs in ways that still echo today. If India and China treated sexuality as cosmic balance, here it becomes moral code, divine law and spiritual obedience. You first step into a Hebrew household in ancient Judea. The voices of priests ring from the temple, reciting lines of Torah. For these communities, sexuality is not merely about family or fertility, it is about covenant. Marriage becomes sacred contract, not only between man and woman but between them and God. Fidelity is paramount. Adultery is not just betrayal of a spouse but sin against heaven. Women are expected to guard their purity fiercely, their virginity proof of honor. Men are commanded to avoid adultery, though double standards linger. Concubines and polygyny appear in scripture, tolerated though not encouraged. The customs here are tightly bound to ritual purity. Menstruating women are secluded during their cycles, considered ritually impure. Couples abstain during this period, resuming intimacy only after purification baths. Laws dictate which unions are forbidden: incest, same-sex relations, bestiality, all condemned in the Torah. These prohibitions shape identity, setting Hebrew communities apart from their neighbors. Where Mesopotamia saw fertility rites, Hebrews saw idolatry. Where Egyptians sang bawdy songs, Hebrews stressed sanctity. In short, sex became boundary, line in the sand between chosen people and outsiders. Yet, contradictions abound. Marriage is honored as sacrament, yet idealized only as procreative. Pleasure is often suspect, framed as temptation of the flesh. Women are expected to embody purity, men to discipline themselves. Monasteries rise where vows of celibacy define entire lives. And yet even within monasteries, stories circulate of secret liaisons, temptations, confessions. The very act of trying to suppress desire ensures it remains obsessively present. A little joke for you: imagine a monk writing his vows on a dating profile, looking for no one, committed to eternal celibacy. Hobbies: fasting, chanting, avoiding eye contact with women. Swipe left, doesn't matter, he's not swiping at all. But let's be fair, Christianity also reshapes customs in ways that protect. Husbands are commanded to love their wives as themselves, to cherish, not merely dominate. Marriage becomes partnership blessed by God, not just contract between families. The ideals are lofty, even if lived unevenly. Sexuality is framed as moral discipline, meant to uplift rather than consume. Now journey east again, to the sands of Arabia in the 7th century. You hear the recitation of the Quran, its verses rolling with rhythm. Islam too frames sexuality within divine law. Sharia, marriage is strongly encouraged, seen as completing half of faith. Unlike Christianity's suspicion of desire, Islam acknowledges it openly as natural, even blessed, provided occurs within lawful bounds. A husband and wife's intimacy is praised, a mercy from God, but boundaries are strict. Fornication and adultery are condemned, punished severely. Polygyny is permitted, up to 4 wives, but only if a man treats each equally. In practice, few could afford it. Women, though veiled and secluded in some contexts, also gain rights. Their dowry belongs to them. Divorce is permitted under certain circumstances, and female pleasure is acknowledged in hadiths that emphasize mutual satisfaction. Compared to some ancient systems, this recognition of women's sexual rights is striking. Yet patriarchy persists, shaping how laws are enforced, often to women's disadvantage. Islamic customs also absorb and regulate older practices. Pre-Islamic Arabia knew concubinage, tribal alliances sealed with women, and casual unions. Islam does not erase these instantly but channels them. Marriage becomes the proper vessel, concubinage permitted under slavery laws, but gradually less central. Desire is not denied, but discipline. Move now into the marketplaces of Damascus, Baghdad, or Cordoba during Islam's golden age. Poets like Abu Nuwas write verses celebrating love between men and women alike, wine and passion intertwined. Erotic manuals circulate, offering frank advice on positions, aphrodisiacs, and the importance of female pleasure. This is not prudish silence, it is vibrant conversation framed by faith and law. To modern eyes, the openness can be surprising. To them it is balance, sex acknowledged, yet bound to moral order. A thought occurs: in earlier eras, sex was ritualized for fertility of fields. Now it is ritualized for fertility of souls. The arena has shifted from earth to heaven, but the customs still serve the same human need to regulate, explain, and sanctify the most powerful instinct we carry. One more joke before we close this section. If early Christians and Muslims had dating apps, Christians would write, "Looking for lifelong partner must love God more than me." Muslims might write, "Seeking halal companionship, dowry negotiable, must be fair if co-wives apply." You'd scroll for hours before finding a match, but once found, the commitment would last a lifetime. or an afterlife. As night deepens over Jerusalem, Rome and Mecca, you sit quietly, reflecting. Sexual customs here are heavier than before, rules, commandments, laws, purity codes, yet they also carry tenderness, love sanctified, marriage cherished, fidelity lifted to divine duty. The struggle between desire and discipline continues, now under the watchful eyes of God, and from here forward, much of the world will live in the shadow of these codes, reshaping sexuality not as ritual of crops, but as moral compass for souls. The candlelight of early churches and mosques flickers away, and you are thrust into the dim, drafty corridors of medieval Europe, between roughly 1000 and 1500 C. The smell hits you first: damp stone, wood smoke, and the faint stench of unwashed bodies, huddled inside narrow cottages. Bells toll in the distance, summoning peasants to prayer. In this world, sexual customs abound in knots of taboo, regulation, and secrecy. Even while behind barn doors and market stalls, people carry on with very human appetites. You step into a village square. Chickens scatter as carts roll over cobbles. The parish priest stands near the church door, his sermons shaping villagers' sense of morality. For ordinary people, sex is framed relentlessly by Christian teaching: chastity before marriage, fidelity within, abstinence during Lent, Advent and feast days. In fact, if villagers followed every prohibition, couples would be intimate less than half the year. Of course, people being people, they don't always follow the rules. Confessionals stay busy, priests wag fingers, and behind hedges lovers laugh at the idea of a liturgical calendar for desire. Marriage here is no longer just a private contract, but a sacrament of the church. Vows are exchanged before God and community. Couples are warned that their union is indissoluble. Divorce is nearly impossible. Annulments exist, but only the wealthy can manage them, often by petitioning bishops or even a pope. For peasants, once you're bound, you're bound. The sexual custom that emerges is grim endurance. Couples may live in harmony, or in misery, but they cannot easily part. And yet outside this rigid framework, customs sprout like weeds in a field. In towns, regulated zones of prostitution emerge. Cities like London, Paris, and Cologne maintain brothels, often licensed by local authorities. Priests condemn them as dens of sin, yet rulers tolerate them as necessary evils to protect respectable women. Prostitutes wear distinctive clothing, striped hoods, colored belts, to mark their trade. Society both scorns and depends on them. Sexual customs here expose hypocrisy. Passion is demonized in sermons but monetized in practice. Another paradox lies in monastic vows. Monks and nuns swear celibacy, devoting themselves to God, but monasteries and convents, isolated yet human, become hotbeds of temptation. Scandals erupt of secret liaisons, children born and hushed away. Church councils repeatedly crack down, issuing new prohibitions. The very act of demanding purity ensures that sexuality remains obsessively monitored. Meanwhile, among the elite, a strange new fashion takes hold: courtly love. Picture a knight kneeling before a lady in a gown, pledging devotion not through marriage, but through poetry and song. Troubadours sing of forbidden longings, noble ladies bestowing favors, a ribbon, a glance, on warriors who pine for them. This love is often chaste in theory, adulterous in practice. The custom elevates yearning itself into an art form. For peasants, this might seem laughable. For nobles it becomes cultural obsession. Some call it noble refinement, others call it elaborate excuse for adultery. A joke for you: imagine explaining courtly love to a farmer's wife. So milady gives me her handkerchief, and I spend 10 years writing poetry about her eyes. The farmer's wife would probably snort and say, "You could have just helped with the harvest." Sexual customs also govern the body itself. Hair and clothing become markers of modesty. Women cover their heads with veils or wimples. Revealing hair is equated with sexual availability. Men's clothing, too, grows increasingly codified, with sumptuary laws regulating who can wear certain fabrics or colors. The body becomes battleground, its coverings declarations of morality. Step into a village cottage now. A married couple lies on a straw bed, children and livestock within earshot. Privacy is almost non-existent. Parents, children, servants, all share cramped space. Sex, though frequent, is hardly romantic. It is woven into survival, yet intimacy exists here too. Shared laughter, whispered comfort, warmth on cold nights. Customs may demand silence, but humanity finds tenderness. And then, lurking behind every sermon, is the constant fear of sin. Masturbation is condemned as spilling seed. thought to weaken the body and imperil the soul. Homosexual acts are harshly punished, though often they persist in secret. Incest taboos extend so far that even distant cousins require papal dispensations to marry. The Church's hand is heavy, shaping customs at every level. Still, local traditions resist. In parts of Europe, couples practice hand fasting, informal betrothals sealed by joining hands before witnesses. Some unions happen in barns without priests, blessed only by community. Folk customs endure alongside canon law, creating a patchwork of practice. Meanwhile, festivals turn morality upside down. During Carnival, before Lent, villagers feast, drink, and indulge. Masks conceal faces, dances grow bawdy, and songs brim with innuendo. For a few nights, desire is unchained, customs relaxed. Then Lent arrives and chastity is preached again. The cycle of repression and release becomes part of the rhythm of life. Cross the Mediterranean to the Islamic caliphates of the Middle Ages, where contrasting customs flourish. In cities like Baghdad and Cordoba, scholars debate erotic poetry openly, even as law codes enforce boundaries. Harems, filled with wives and concubines, shape dynastic politics. Love poetry by women survives, their voices celebrating pleasure as boldly as men's. While Christian Europe wraps sex in guilt, Islamic courts often frame it in beauty, wit, and scholarship. Return to Europe, and you hear whispers of heresy. Some sects, like the Cathars, preach abstinence, seeing the body as corrupt. Others, accused of libertinism, are said to engage in free love under cloak of secrecy. The Church cracks down on both extremes, declaring orthodoxy the only safe path. Customs are enforced with fire, sword, and inquisition. And yet folk humor cuts through solemnity. Jokes about lusty priests, bawdy songs about eager wives, riddles filled with double meanings, these circulate in markets and taverns. Villagers laugh at the very rules they obey. Humor becomes safety valve, proof that desire cannot be extinguished. One last glimpse. In illuminated manuscripts, monks doodle marginalia of rabbits chasing each other with oversized phalluses. Scholars today marvel at these drawings, half shocked, half amused. Even the keepers of chastity couldn't resist slipping desire into the margins. Custom, control, and craving always dance together. A joke for you: imagine Tinder in medieval Europe. Owns 3 fields, pious, never eaten meat during Lent. Swipe right if you want a dowry of 2 cows, not exactly romantic, but at least reliable. As the church bell tolls midnight, you sit back and reflect. Sexual customs of the Middle Ages were tangled webs of law, ritual, hypocrisy, and humor. Fidelity preached, prostitution tolerated, celibacy demanded, scandals hushed, courtly love celebrated, adultery punished. The contradictions are dizzying, but they reveal something simple: people always found ways to bend the rules. From straw beds to castle halls, from bawdy festivals to whispered confessions, medieval sexuality shows humanity caught between repression and joy, between divine command and earthly desire. And as you drift into sleep, you sense that the struggle only intensifies as new worlds, new plagues, and new philosophies arrive. The church bells of medieval Europe fade into the distance, and when you open your eyes again, you're standing in a very different landscape. The smell of smoke from peat fires, the rustle of palm fronds, the rhythm of drums echoing through forests and plains. This is the world of Africa, the Americas, and the Pacific Islands before European domination. Between roughly 1000 and 1500 CE, whole continents lived by customs entirely distinct from the codes of Christendom and Islam. Here sexuality was rarely hidden. It was woven into kinship, ritual, and community in ways that can feel shockingly free compared to Europe's rigid rules. You find yourself in a savanna village in West Africa. Huts circle a central space, cattle low in their pens, women pounding grain in wooden mortars. Sexual customs here are tied to lineage systems, and lineage can mean very different things depending on the people. In other parts of Africa, polygyny is common. A man of wealth and cattle may marry several wives, each with her own hut, her own fields, her own children. Far from the caricature of jealous rivalry, many of these households run with surprising cooperation. Co-wives share labor, raising each other's children. Custom teaches harmony as survival strategy. Of course, conflicts erupt, but the system endures because it distributes work and ensures heirs. Sex here is not private possession, but community resource. Rites of passage dominate. In one village, Adolescent boys are led into the bush for circumcision ceremonies, returning days later as men, their new status acknowledged in dances and feasts. Girls, too, undergo initiation rituals, sometimes involving bodily markings or seclusion, where elder women teach them the secrets of fertility, marriage, and desire. Sexuality is not left to personal discovery, it is taught, codified, ritualized. By the time a youth marries, they carry knowledge of both pleasure and duty passed down through generations. And sex is not shamed. In some communities, young people engage in trial marriages, living together for months or years to test compatibility. If it fails, they part without scandal. In others, night dances allow teenagers to flirt, sing, and explore desire under watchful eyes of elders who expect experimentation before marriage. Imagine a medieval peasant overhearing this, their jaw would drop at the freedom. A joke for you, imagine African trial marriage on a dating app. Profile, currently testing compatibility, may return to village single but with better cooking skills, honest, at least. Move west across the Atlantic, you find yourself in the Americas, before European arrival, in the forests of the Amazon. Sexuality is tied to fertility rituals and shamanic visions. Among some tribes, women believed children could be fathered by multiple men. The idea of partible paternity, a woman might sleep with several partners during pregnancy, each contributing seed, all of them then shared responsibility for the child. Far from scandal, this custom reduced jealousy and strengthened community bonds. In North America, customs vary wildly. Among the Iroquois, matrilineal clans give women control over households and crops. Wives can dismiss husbands simply by leaving his belongings outside the longhouse. Among the Lakota, visions guide marriage choices, and polygyny is accepted if resources allow. Customs reflect practicality. What ensures harmony and survival is considered right. And then there is gender diversity. Many indigenous peoples honor two-spirit individuals, those who embody both masculine and feminine roles. They may marry, raise children, serve as healers or mediators. Far from marginal, they are respected as sacred. Cross the Pacific to the islands of Polynesia. Here the ocean sparkles turquoise, palm trees sway, and customs around sex astonish early European visitors. In Tahiti and Hawaii, sexuality is celebrated openly. Adolescents engage freely before marriage. Dances and songs brim with erotic imagery, and nudity is natural. Chiefs may keep multiple partners, while commoners enjoy remarkable freedom. Missionaries later call this licentiousness. Locals see it as life's joy. In Samoa, young men and women perform courtship dances, their bodies oiled and adorned with flowers. Virginity of high-born women may be prized, but for most, pleasure is not taboo. In Hawaii, relationships between men, or between women, are accepted, even expected, in some ranks. Sexual customs are fluid, woven into play, politics, and spirituality. And yet across all these regions, one theme recurs: sex as communal, not private. Whether in African polygyny, Amazonian shared fatherhood, or Polynesian festivals, intimacy is rarely hidden behind closed doors. It belongs to the group, shaped by ritual, obligation, and joy. To Europeans steeped in guilt, this felt scandalous. To the people living it, it was natural. You crouch at a Pacific shoreline as conch shells blow, summoning villagers for a festival. Men wear garlands of shells, women skirts of tapa cloth. Drums beat, hips sway, and songs filled with teasing metaphors ripple through the night. Couples slip away into palm groves, returning later laughing. No one scolds them, the community smiles. Sexuality here is celebration, not sin. Of course, customs are not all utopia. In some African and Pacific societies, virginity tests are imposed, women's fidelity policed, punishments enforced for adultery. Patriarchal hierarchies persist, though often softened by matrilineal kinship or communal bonds. As always, desire is caught between freedom and control. Another joke for you: imagine Polynesian Tinder. Profiles might read: surf champion, dances well at night festivals, knows 12 different fishing techniques. Honestly, better odds than swiping in a medieval monastery. As you rest beneath a baobab tree, you reflect. In Europe, sex is bound in law and guilt. Here it is woven into kinship, ritual, and laughter. Customs diverge dramatically, proving there is no single human way to organize desire. What shocks one culture is ordinary to another. What one calls sin, another calls festival. And as you drift into sleep, lulled by drums across oceans and fires on savannas, you realize that these diverse customs carry one lesson: Sexuality is endlessly adaptable. It bends to environment, to family, to myth, to survival, and no matter the form, people find joy in it. The drums of Africa and the laughter of Pacific festivals fade, and you open your eyes to a very different sound: the creak of wagon wheels, the toll of church bells, and the scratch of quills on parchment. You're in Renaissance and Enlightenment Europe, somewhere between 1500 and 1800, a world where printing presses hum, artists paint with bold strokes, and scientists whisper heresies about planets orbiting the sun. Here, sexuality begins to move out of the shadows of medieval guilt and into the light of curiosity, scandal, and sometimes even open debate. You first step into a Venetian alley. At night, lanterns swing, casting golden pools of light on cobblestones. A masked figure glides by, laughter echoing from a balcony. This is carnival, and in this city, customs stretch. Women in domino masks flirt freely. Men slip into shadows with strangers, and anonymity grants license. The church thunders disapproval, but the city thrives on its reputation for indulgence. Brothels flourish, courtesans entertain poets and princes alike, and sexuality becomes performance, half commerce, half. Courtesans especially redefine customs. In Venice, Paris, and Madrid, they are more than prostitutes, they are cultural figures, dressed in silks, educated in music and poetry. They host salons where politics and philosophy mix with seduction. A wealthy merchant might pay for their company not only for intimacy, but for wit and conversation. Compare this to medieval Europe, where prostitutes wore shame-marking clothes. Now some courtesans rival duchesses in power and wealth. Desire has become a profession wrapped in elegance. Step into a Florentine studio, and you'll see another change. Artists paint bodies not as sinful temptations, but as glorious works of nature. Botticelli's Venus rises from her shell. Michelangelo's David stands naked in defiance. Rubens paints voluptuous nudes bursting with vitality. Where the Middle Ages draped shame, the Renaissance unveils beauty. Sexuality is reclaimed as art, its customs reshaped by brush and marble. But art is not the only stage. Printing presses churn out erotic pamphlets and woodcuts. Some are bawdy jokes, others explicit manuals. What once circulated as whispered rumor is now mass-produced. Authorities crack down, but demand persists. A joke for you: imagine a Renaissance dating profile, owns vineyard, reads Petrarch sonnets aloud, can afford silk doublets, looking for someone who appreciates lute music, and won't tell the Inquisition. Swipe right at your own risk. Cross the channel to Tudor England. Here, sexuality becomes a matter of dynasties. Henry VIII's marital adventures reveal how customs bend under royal will. Divorce is banned by the Pope. Then the king invents a new church. Wives are executed or discarded for failing to produce heirs. For nobles, marriage is politics. For commoners, it is survival. Yet beneath the rigid codes, bawdy ballads and ribald jokes spread through taverns. The tension between propriety and appetite hums everywhere. By the 17th century, Enlightenment thinkers turn even sexuality into a topic for philosophy. Writers like Montesquieu and Voltaire pen satirical stories poking fun at hypocrisy. Medical texts begin to study reproduction scientifically, stripping away some of the mystery. At the same time, libertine culture blossoms. In France, figures like Casanova and the Marquis de Sade scandalize Europe with tales of seduction and excess. Custom splits. On one hand, bourgeois morality tightens, emphasizing fidelity and modesty. On the other, salons whisper of libertinage, affairs and secret liaisons. And don't forget science creeping into the bedroom. Anatomists publish detailed engravings of bodies. Physicians write manuals on conception, sometimes wildly inaccurate. One insists women must orgasm to conceive. Another prescribes diets to determine a child's sex. Still, the idea that sexuality can be studied rationally is revolutionary. Desire is no longer only sin, it is biology, psychology, even politics. Meanwhile, laws evolve. In Protestant lands, divorce becomes possible in limited circumstances. In Catholic lands, it remains nearly impossible. Homosexuality is criminalized harshly across much of Europe, yet underground cultures persist. In London's molly houses, men gather discreetly, creating subcultures that will echo centuries later. Custom is double-edged: official repression, secret community. Across the seas, colonization spreads European customs outward, and collides with indigenous traditions. Missionaries in the Americas and Pacific denounce licentious dances, trial marriages, and fluid genders. They impose marriage, chastity, and Christian morality, often with violence, yet local customs resist, adapt, or blend. In Latin America, festivals like Carnival merge African, indigenous, and European traditions, creating new forms of erotic celebration that endure today. Sexual customs become global battlegrounds as empires try to stamp out what they don't understand. Step into an 18th century French boudoir, candles flickering against silk wallpaper, lovers whisper beneath powdered wigs, their assignations hidden but not invisible, letters circulate, full of coded language and suggestive poetry. Scandals explode when affairs reach the press. Whole careers collapse over accusations of sexual misconduct. For the elite, custom is both cage and stage, private life scrutinized, but also flaunted as sophistication. And for common folk, customs remain rooted in practicality. Peasants marry young, share crowded cottages, raise large families. Premarital sex is common. Parish records show many brides already pregnant at weddings. Officials scold, but communities shrug. For them, survival outweighs sermons. Babies are mouths to feed, but also hands to work. Custom bends to necessity. Yet by the late Enlightenment, new voices emerge calling for freedom. Some argue for women's right to education, even to choose partners. Mary Wollstonecraft denounces marriage as legal prostitution, demanding equality. Radical pamphlets hint that sexuality too should be freed from chains of hypocrisy. These ideas shock conservatives, but plant seeds. You close your eyes to the smell of wax and perfume, the rustle of silk sheets, and the scratch of quills writing love poems and manifestos. You sense that the next chapter will swing the pendulum back hard toward repression. For if the Renaissance celebrated the body, the coming Victorian world will try very hard to cover it again. Walk down a London street, and you see both extremes. On one side, prime women in high-necked dresses walk arm in arm, parasols shading their faces, eyes averted from anything indelicate. On the other, gaudy brothels advertise discreetly, and gin shops spill drunken men into alleys where prostitutes wait. Customs decree that sex must be hidden behind lace curtains, yet it saturates the city, humming beneath the surface of every cobblestone. Victorian marriage is treated as sacred duty. Women are instructed to embody purity, modesty, and self-sacrifice. Men are told to be protectors and providers. Intimacy is framed as procreative only. Pleasure, especially for women, is rarely acknowledged. Doctors warn wives against excessive passion, prescribing calm obedience instead. Yet statistics reveal the reality: large families, high birth rates, and a booming sex trade. Customs may preach chastity, but bodies tell another story. The medical profession joins the conversation with increasing authority. Physicians issue pamphlets warning against masturbation, claiming it drains vitality and leads to insanity. Elaborate devices are sold to prevent boys from touching themselves at night. Chastity belts reimagined as medical contraptions. Parents whisper anxiously, children suffer shame, and doctors profit. This obsession with control reveals how customs shift from the pulpit to the clinic. Desire becomes pathology. Meanwhile, prostitution reaches astonishing visibility. In London alone, estimates suggest tens of thousands of women work as prostitutes, serving everyone from dock workers to dukes. Parliament even debates the problem, passing the Contagious Diseases Acts, which allow police to arrest women suspected of being prostitutes and subject them to invasive medical exams. The men who visit them face no punishment. Custom again reveals its bias: women policed, men excused. Campaigners like Josephine Butler rise to challenge this injustice, but stigma persists. But sexuality isn't only about scandal, it's about identity. In this era, medical texts begin to categorize what they call sexual inversion, perversion, and Uranian love. For the first time, same-sex attraction is described not just as sin but as psychological condition. Men like Oscar Wilde live flamboyantly yet suffer persecution when trials expose their desires. Customs here are cruel. Society both creates and punishes categories of identity. A joke for you: imagine Victorian Tinder. Respectable lady, skilled at embroidery, never speaks of ankles. Looking for a gentleman with steady income and minimal syphilis. Swipe left if you're caught by the Contagious Diseases Act. Yet for all the repression, a fascination with sexuality grows. Erotic novels circulate under the table, Pornographic prints sell in secret shops, and brothels adopt themes, Egyptian rooms, Grecian chambers like early versions of adult Disneyland. Men keep mistresses openly, wealthy women risk scandal in affairs, what is denied in daylight flourishes in gaslit shadows. And then there's fashion. The corset becomes symbol of both oppression and allure. Women are cinched into hourglass shapes, waists shrunk to impossible proportions, doctors warn of crushed organs, feminists denounce the practice, yet the fashion persists. Sexual customs once again are written on the body itself. What is alluring is also painful, what is duty becomes spectacle. Cross the Atlantic to the United States, and you see similar contradictions. Puritan heritage lingers, but urban centers bustle with brothels, burlesque theaters, and dime store erotica. Anthony Comstock campaigns against obscenity, banning contraceptive information and erotic material. Yet underground, the trade thrives. The louder society shouts no, the more determined desire whispers yes. At the same time, women's voices rise. Feminists argue for property rights, education and birth control. Writers like Mary Wollstonecraft's Heirs, and later Margaret Sanger push against the notion that women exist only for reproduction. Pamphlets on contraception circulate quietly, teaching couples to limit family size. Customs of silence begin to fracture under the pressure of practicality and rights. Peel back the velvet curtain, and you find another world, the scientific study of sex, quietly advancing. By the late 19th century, scholars like Krafft Ebing published Psychopathia Sexualis, cataloging fetishes, orientations, and practices with clinical detachment, and maybe a hint of curiosity. Customs shift yet again. What was once moral sin becomes medical case study. People begin to see sexuality, not as purely choice but as identity, condition, or innate drive. The vocabulary of modern sexuality is being born, though wrapped in Victorian prudishness. Let's not forget humor. Despite sermons and science, bawdy jokes fill music halls. Songs about randy soldiers, lusty widows, and tipsy maidens draw laughter from audiences desperate for release. Customs are hypocritical, yes, but they leave space for comic relief. Even the sternest society needs to laugh about what it forbids. And amid all this repression and contradiction, intimacy endures. Couples fall in love, sneak kisses in gardens, write secret letters. Soldiers at war carry photos of sweethearts. Servants steal moments behind kitchens. Even in the strictest household, someone is blushing in the hallway. The universal truth persists. No custom, however harsh, can entirely smother desire. One more joke before the lights dim. Imagine Comstock running a dating app. Profiles banned, pictures blurred, conversations censored. The only message allowed, "Will you marry me?" Even then, probably reported as obscene. You close your eyes as a gas lamp sputters. Somewhere, a brothel door creaks, a church bell tolls, a medical lecture drones. The contradictions swirl together, setting the stage for wars, revolutions, and revolutions of the bedroom alike. As you drift through a London foggy street, you reflect. Victorian customs are paradox embodied, repression and indulgence, silence and obsession, morality and scandal. They create shame, yet also the foundations of modern sexual science. They cage women, yet also provoke feminist rebellion. They punish difference, yet also name and describe it. Out of this tense crucible, the 20th century will emerge, ready to shake everything apart. The fog of Victorian London rolls back, and the crack of gunfire startles you awake. You're standing amid the upheavals of the 20th century, a time when sexuality collides with wars, revolutions, and global transformations. From 1900 to mid-century, sexual customs swing between repression and liberation, tested in trenches, in households, and in nightclubs lit by neon for the very first time. At the dawn of the century, customs still bear Victorian weight. Women are expected to marry young, remain faithful, raise large families. Men enjoy broader freedoms, though always behind the shield of double standards. Homosexuality remains criminalized in most countries. Masturbation is still whispered about as illness, yet beneath the surface, cracks widen. Urbanization, suffrage movements, and new technologies stir restless change. The First World War explodes in 1914, and sexuality shifts instantly. Millions of men are sent to trenches, millions of women step into factories, customs bend to necessity, engaged couples rush into marriage before deployment, soldiers carry photographs, pressed flowers, and letters scented with perfume. In muddy dugouts, intimacy is remembered, fantasized, desperately clung to. Brothels spring up near camps, tolerated by armies despite official disapproval. Venereal disease spreads, governments respond with medical inspections, echoing Victorian hypocrisy. Still longing persists as soldiers etch pin-up girls on trench walls and hum bawdy songs to distract themselves from fear. On the home front, women discover new independence. They cut hair shorter, dress more freely, and realize that their lives need not be confined to kitchens. When the war ends, many do not want to return to old customs. Desire, sexual and social fuels rebellion. The 1920s roar with change. Step into a jazz club in Harlem or Berlin. Trumpets blare, skirts twirl, cigarettes glow. Young women, the flappers, scandalize elders with bobbed hair, short skirts and a carefree approach to dating. Dancing close, kissing in cars, drinking gin. These customs, once unthinkable, become nightly routine. The automobile itself becomes a sexual revolution on wheels, granting privacy for lovers away from watchful eyes. Homosexual subcultures thrive quietly in these urban spaces. Berlin hosts gay bars and drag performances. Paris becomes haven for lesbian artists. Harlem's Renaissance celebrates queer writers and musicians. For the first time, sexuality begins forming communities, identities and movements. Yet, danger lurks. Conservative backlash grows, and laws remain harsh. Visibility is fragile, but it exists. A joke for you: imagine a 1920s dating profile, fluent in Charleston, smokes Lucky Strikes, owns automobile, looking for someone to scandalize my parents with. Swipe right if you can dance all night. The Great Depression of the 1930s slams the brakes. Economic hardship reshapes customs again. Marriages postponed, fertility rates drop, women pushed back toward domestic roles. Yet even in breadlines, romance persists. Couples dance in cheap halls, share kisses on park benches, cling to intimacy as escape from despair. Sexuality bends with circumstance, sometimes exuberant, sometimes cautious, always present. Then comes the Second World War, and again customs transform. Soldiers march, lovers part, hasty marriages surge. Pin-up girls, Betty Grable, Rita Hayworth, become global icons, their images tucked into helmets and bunk beds. Sexuality is morale, escape, promise of return. Armies establish comfort stations, brothels for soldiers, often tragically coercive, with women exploited under euphemisms of duty. Venereal disease again spreads. Governments issue pamphlets warning soldiers to check yourself before you wreck yourself, though in more formal phrasing. On the home front, women once again step into factories, this time symbolized by Rosie the Riveter. They cut hair short, wear trousers, and discover both freedom and exhaustion. War reshapes gender roles, and with them, sexual customs. After victory, many women are told to return to kitchens, but the genie is out of the bottle. In the rubble of post-war Europe and booming suburbs of America, sexuality takes contradictory forms. On one hand, the 1950s celebrate domestic ideals, nuclear families, white picket fences, strict gender roles. Magazines praise obedient housewives and breadwinner husbands. Schools warn against premarital sex. Films censor kisses longer than 3 seconds. Yet, under the surface, desire pulses. Playboy launches in 1953. Hugh Hefner, selling not just nude photos but the fantasy of leisure, sophistication, and indulgence. Millions buy in, reshaping what masculinity and desire look like. Meanwhile, gay communities grow quietly in urban bars and secret networks. Police raids terrorize them, but subcultures persist. Books like Kinsey's Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, 1948, and Female, 1953, explode myths by documenting what people actually do in bed. Customs are revealed as illusions. Premarital sex is common, masturbation nearly universal, same-sex experiences more frequent than anyone admitted. The data shocks society, proving that repression and reality rarely match. Another joke for you: imagine a 1950s dating profile. Looking for husband, must enjoy lawn care and brand new washing machines. Premarital sex: officially no, unofficially, let's just say Kinsey knows. By mid-century, the contradictions are impossible to ignore. Wars have loosened morals. Urbanization created anonymity. Science exposed hidden truths. Customs still cling to control, chastity belts of law and morality, but the locks are rusting. Young people grow restless. Parents mutter about rebellious youth. The stage is set for an upheaval so powerful it will be called simply the sexual revolution. But before we rush ahead, pause to notice the threads, from trenches to jazz clubs, from Rosie's rivets to Playboy's pages. 20th century sexuality is shaped by two forces, catastrophe and liberation. Wars force change, crises reveal hypocrisy, peace brings experimentation. Each custom arises, collapses or mutates in the pressure cooker of modernity. You close your eyes to the sound of a saxophone drifting from a 1940s dance hall, the smell of rationed cigarettes, the taste of warm beer. Couples sway, soldiers lean in for forbidden kisses, and somewhere a teenager hides a Kinsey report under the bed. Desire is shifting, customs unraveling, and the century has only just begun. It begins with a little disc of science, the birth control pill, approved in 1960. For the first time in history, women can reliably separate sex from reproduction. This single invention detonates centuries of custom. A young woman can now attend university, pursue a career, choose partners freely, without fear of an accidental pregnancy derailing her life. Families fume, churches rage, politicians debate, but the change is irreversible. In dorm rooms and apartments, couples test a new world, intimacy without inevitable consequence. The pill alone doesn't spark revolution though. The context is everything. Post-war youth grow up amid conformity, but also consumer culture and new media. They watch television, buy records, hear voices urging rebellion. Rock and roll already scandalized the 1950s. Now the 1960s twist hips further. Elvis was tame compared to the Rolling Stones, whose lyrics drip with innuendo. Sexual customs are carried on guitar strings, broadcast into millions of bedrooms. Then there's protest. Civil rights movements demand equality. Anti-war protests reject authority. Feminist groups denounce patriarchy. Sexual freedom becomes tied to broader liberation. In 1963, Betty Friedan publishes The Feminine Mystique, challenging the notion that women's fulfillment lies only in housewifery. Feminists demand contraception, abortion rights, the end of marital rape immunity. Customs crack as women insist sexuality must serve them, not cage them. A joke for you: imagine a 1970s dating profile, owns vinyl collection, protests on weekends, free love enthusiast, looking for someone to share weed, not mortgages. Swipe right if you don't mind tie-dye sheets. Meanwhile, the counterculture of hippies pushes boundaries further. At music festivals like Woodstock, 1969, couples make love in tents while guitars wail under stormy skies. Nudity is no longer shame but statement. Our bodies are free. Communes experiment with open relationships, rejecting monogamy as bourgeois trap. Sexual customs become experiments, sometimes utopian, sometimes disastrous. Jealousy doesn't vanish just because the manifesto says it should, but the attempt itself changes norms. LGBTQ+ communities step into the light. In 1969, patrons at the Stonewall Inn in New York resist a police raid, sparking riots that ignite the modern gay rights movement. Pride marches follow, rainbow flags unfurl, and a new custom emerges: identity itself as political declaration. To be openly gay, lesbian, or trans is to defy centuries of silence. The revolution is not only about straight couples with birth control, it is about entire communities demanding recognition. Across the 1970s, erotic media explodes. Pornographic films like Deep Throat, 1972, attract mainstream audiences, sparking debates about obscenity versus liberation. Magazines proliferate, Playboy gains rivals, Penthouse pushes boundaries, feminist presses publish erotica from women's perspectives. For some this is emancipation, for others, exploitation. Custom fractures, what one group sees as freedom, another calls commodification. And don't forget swinging. Suburban couples bored with picket fences host key parties, husbands toss keys into bowls, wives draw blindly, partners swap for the night, whether myth exaggerated or reality lived. The rumor itself signals new attitudes. Sex is no longer whispered shame, but cocktail party conversation. Yet, the revolution is not without backlash. Religious conservatives decry moral collapse, linking social upheaval to declining family values. Politicians exploit the fear, calling for return to tradition. The pendulum swings violently, liberation met by outrage, experimentation met by caution. By the late 1970s, another shadow falls: HIV/AIDS. First emerging in gay communities, it devastates lives while governments delay action. Fear spreads, Sexual freedom suddenly feels dangerous again. Customs shift rapidly. Safe sex campaigns arise. Condoms return to center stage. Casual encounters gain new risks. The revolution doesn't end, but it sobers. Liberation collides with mortality, reminding everyone that customs are always reshaped by circumstance. Cross oceans to Europe, and you see parallel waves. In France, May 1968 protests merge politics with sexual liberation. Students scrawling graffiti, "It is forbidden to forbid." In Scandinavia, sex education becomes normalized. Nudity on television unremarkable. Customs here reflect openness, treating sexuality as natural, not shameful. Contrast with parts of Latin America or Asia, where military regimes or traditional norms clamp down, yet underground movements whisper of change. Another joke for you: imagine a hippie-era dating app. Free spirit, no possessions, owns one hammock. Seeking cosmic connection must enjoy patchouli and not mind communal showers. Swipe right if you bring your own drum. Amid all this, intimacy remains deeply personal. Couples still fall in love, write letters, build families. Not everyone joins communes or marches at Pride. Many navigate quiet changes, access to contraception, acceptance of premarital sex, conversations once impossible now possible. The revolution is not only about spectacle, it is about millions of private lives transformed by new freedoms. By the 1980s, the revolution matures into culture war. Conservatives, under leaders like Reagan and Thatcher, push family values, while activists fight for reproductive rights, LGBTQ pro-recognition, and sexual education. The tension is fierce, unresolved. Customs diverge. In some households abstinence is preached, in others, safe sex pamphlets sit openly on kitchen tables. As you close your eyes in this era, you hear echoes: guitars at Woodstock, chants at Stonewall, the rattle of pill bottles, the laughter of swingers, the sorrowful silence of AIDS wards. Sexual customs have erupted into public life like never before. What was once private is now political. What was once forbidden is shouted in marches. And yet beneath revolution and backlash, the oldest truth persists. Humans seek love, desire, and connection, in every form they can imagine. The rainbow flags of the 1980s ripple away, and suddenly the glow of a computer monitor fills your vision. The year is the 1990s, sliding into the early 2000s, and sexuality is about to be reshaped not by temples or printing presses, or even pills, but by glowing screens and fiber optic cables. Welcome to the digital age of intimacy, where sexual customs move from whispered secrets and neighborhood scandals to pixels, chat rooms, and profiles shared across the globe. You hear the familiar buzz of dial-up internet. Someone upstairs yells, "Get off the phone, I'm trying to connect." On the screen, early chat rooms light up. ASL, age, sex, location, the three-letter code of digital flirting. For the first time, people can meet strangers far beyond their village, city, or even country. Desire leaps borders. Sexual customs once defined by church bells or kinship networks are suddenly rewritten by usernames and emoticons. But even before broadband, mass media changes customs. In the 1990s, pop stars like Madonna flaunt sexuality openly, bending taboos on MTV. Her book Sex shocks parents, thrills fans, and normalizes conversations about desire in ways unimaginable a generation earlier. Boy bands and girl groups churn out choreographed innuendos, while music videos leave little to subtlety. Sexual customs now spread globally, exported on VHS tapes and satellite television. Meanwhile, the AIDS crisis continues, reshaping customs profoundly. By the 1990s, safe sex campaigns are everywhere. Condoms become normalized. Advertisements preach responsibility. In schools, awkward teachers hand out pamphlets, and students snicker, yet beneath the discomfort lies new openness. Sex education is no longer whispered but mandated. The custom of silence collapses under necessity. The internet accelerates everything. In the early 2000s, dating websites emerge: Match.com, eHarmony, promising algorithms to find soulmates. At first, people laugh, meeting online, how desperate, but slowly customs shift. Profiles with hobbies, favorite movies, and grainy photos become normal. The stigma fades. For shy souls, for people in small towns, for those seeking niche communities, digital intimacy opens doors never imagined. And then comes pornography, flooding like a tidal wave. No longer hidden in brown paper magazines or shady theaters, it is now one click away. For some, this is liberation. For others, corruption. Customs shift rapidly. adolescents, now learn about sex, not from whispered playground rumors, but from unfiltered online videos. Parents panic, governments debate censorship, but the genie is out of the bottle. The sexual script is now written by algorithms. A joke for you: imagine a late 1990s dating profile, owns dial-up, loves Napster, seeks partner who won't mind if I tie up the landline all night. Swipe right, but be patient, it might take 15 minutes to load the page. While the internet rewrites connection, politics reshapes law. In the 1990s and early 2000s, LGBTQ+ rights advance, decriminalization spreads, same-sex partnerships gain recognition, pride marches grow massive. In 2001, the Netherlands becomes the first country to legalize same-sex marriage. Customs once condemned by law now celebrated by states. For queer couples, intimacy no longer means secrecy, but marriage licenses, mortgages, adoption papers. Yet, backlash persists. In many countries, traditionalists resist, passing bans, staging protests. The culture wars rage. Conservative talk shows warn of moral collapse. Progressives celebrate freedom. Customs are no longer just personal, they are televised debates, election platforms, courtroom battles. The bedroom has become political stage. Meanwhile, globalization spreads customs across borders. Bollywood films hint more openly at romance. K-pop idols cultivate carefully controlled sex appeal. Latin American telenovelas flood screens with torrid affairs. What was once local custom is now global conversation. Young people from Buenos Aires to Seoul to Nairobi consume the same media, negotiate the same shifting standards. Step into a 2000s nightclub, neon flashing, bass thumping, couples grind on dance floors, kissing freely. Compare this to the prudish ballroom dances of the 1950s, and the shift is dizzying. Public intimacy, once scandalous, is now weekend routine. Customs evolve quickly in urban centers, leaving elders muttering about the death of decency, but for youth, it feels like freedom. Technology accelerates again. The iPhone launches in 2007, and with it, apps transform intimacy. Tinder appears in 2012, and suddenly swiping left or right becomes ritual. The casual hookup is normalized. Netflix and chill becomes global phrase. For some this is exhilarating, partners at your fingertips. For others, exhausting, a marketplace of endless options. Shallow and transactional, customs splinter. Some embrace hookup culture, others retreat into longing for old-fashioned romance. Another joke for you: imagine Tinder in 2013. Loves avocado toast, has Instagram for my cat, 6 foot tall if that matters. Swipe right if you don't mind Wi-Fi outages mid-date. And yet, even as technology revolutionizes desire, old customs persist. Families in many cultures still arrange marriages, still prize virginity, still view sexuality through religious or traditional frameworks. The internet reaches villages, but elders still scold. A daughter may chat online at night and attend a chaperoned festival by day. Customs layer, old and new coexisting, sometimes peacefully, sometimes not. Pornography's omnipresence sparks debates about addiction, unrealistic expectations, exploitation. Movements for ethical porn, feminist porn, and censorship clash. Some argue the internet democratizes sexuality, others warn it commodifies intimacy into algorithms and ad revenue. The custom of private fantasy is no longer private, it is industrial, global, monetized. Meanwhile, sex education continues to evolve. In Scandinavia, candid classes treat desire as natural. In the US, abstinence-only programs linger, fueling confusion. Online forums step in to answer questions. Schools avoid. Teenagers learn more from Reddit threads and YouTube videos than from textbooks. Customs of silence are gone, but customs of misinformation thrive. By the 2010s, identities multiply. Gender fluidity, asexuality, pansexuality, terms once unknown now circulate widely. Online spaces give language to experiences long lived in silence. For many, discovering these labels feels like finding home. Customs shift to include pronouns in bios, pride parades with wider banners, classrooms teaching inclusivity. For others, the change feels dizzying, sparking resistance. Once again, sexuality is culture war battlefield. And then, the pandemic of 2020 rewrites everything. Lockdowns trap couples in small apartments, or separate lovers across borders. Dating apps pivot to video calls, quarantine pods, socially distanced walks. Customs of intimacy bend to necessity. Some relationships collapse under pressure, others strengthen. A new custom emerges, intimacy mediated by screens not only as flirtation but as survival. A final joke before we pause: imagine a COVID-era dating profile, vaccinated, owns 6 masks, skilled at sourdough, looking for someone to share hand sanitizer and existential dread. Swipe right if you enjoy Zoom wine nights. As you lie back and let the glow of your imaginary phone screen fade, you reflect. The digital age of intimacy is chaotic, thrilling, overwhelming. Never before have customs shifted so fast, from dial-up chat rooms, to pride parades, to Tinder swipes in barely 2 decades, and yet the heart of it remains familiar, longing for connection, joy and desire, the awkward dance of attraction. Technology may rewrite customs, but the story beneath is timeless. You drift into sleep to the hum of servers, the ping of new messages, and the quiet truth that every pixel on every screen still hides an ancient instinct to reach out, to touch, to be touched. The glow of smartphones dims, and when you open your eyes again it is 2024. The room is lit not by candles or oil lamps, but by the blue haze of LED strips, computer screens, and notification icons. The air hums with the low whir of servers, and somewhere a voice assistant says, "Good morning, you have 3 new matches." Welcome to the present moment, when sexual customs are shifting faster than at any point in human history, shaped by apps, activism, and arguments that rage across continents in real time. You glance at a phone screen, and there it is: Tinder, Bumble, Grindr, Hinge, OkCupid, Field, endless icons, endless possibilities. The custom of courtship, once tied to family alliances or neighborhood dances, has become a matter of swipes and algorithms. Millions of people now describe their desire not to neighbors but to strangers scattered across cities and nations. Some log on for love, others for hookups, some for validation. For many, dating apps feel like supermarket aisles of intimacy, overwhelming, exciting, exhausting. The new ritual is the profile, bio lines, selfies, witty captions. A good one is the modern equivalent of painting yourself in ochre, except with ring lights and filters. And yet, apps are only one piece. The hookup culture they foster, especially among younger generations, has shifted customs dramatically. Casual sex, once scandalous, is now normalized in many urban centers. Netflix and chill became shorthand for an entire era's approach to intimacy. Friends with benefits arrangements thrive. Some embrace this freedom, others feel drained by its transactional feel. The custom of serial dating replaces the older custom of early marriage. For some, liberation; for others, loneliness. Overlaying all this is the conversation about consent. Movements like Me Too, which erupted in 2017, redefined sexual customs worldwide. What was once brushed off as boys will be boys is now scrutinized as harassment, coercion, abuse. Workplaces implement training, universities overhaul policies, celebrities topple under allegations. The culture of silence breaks. Consent, enthusiastic, ongoing, explicit, becomes the new custom, at least in principle. Discussions of power dynamics, boundaries and respect move into mainstream conversation. For many this is long overdue justice, for some uncomfortable reckoning. Either way, it is a transformation as profound as the birth control pill. Step into a pride parade. In 2024, rainbow flags ripple alongside trans flags, bisexual flags, asexual flags. Marchers chant, dance, kiss openly. 50 years ago such displays risked arrest. Now, in many countries they are annual celebrations with corporate sponsorship and political weight. Customs have shifted from secrecy to visibility, from whispered identities to unapologetic banners. Yet in other countries the same march would draw batons and jail time. The global picture is uneven: progress in one place, persecution in another. Sexual customs are now explicitly geopolitical. Online, discourse is relentless. TikTok influencers post about attachment styles, polyamory, or queer identity. Reddit forums debate fetishes, ethical non-monogamy, or whether ghosting counts as cruelty. Memes joke about dating disasters. Viral tweets coin new terms: situationship, benching, orbiting. Language itself becomes custom, shaping how people describe their experiences. Where once love poems and religious laws defined sexuality, now hashtags do. A joke for you. Imagine a 2024 dating profile, looking for someone who won't ghost me, knows their love language, and actually reads the bio before swiping. Must tolerate my emotional support water bottle. Swipe right if you send dog pics instead of hey. Technology complicates intimacy further. OnlyFans and similar platforms allow individuals to sell erotic content directly, blurring the line between sex work and influencer culture. Some call it empowerment, people controlling their own labor and image. Others call it exploitation, another industry monetizing desire. Either way, customs shift. Millions now view adult content not as shady backroom magazines but as mainstream subscription. Sex work, long stigmatized, suddenly sits at the intersection of e-commerce and fandom. Meanwhile, AI and VR reshape desire in surreal ways. Chatbots simulate partners, VR headsets immerse users in erotic fantasy worlds, sex toys sync with apps, allowing couples thousands of miles apart to share physical sensation in real time. The custom of intimacy stretches across distance, across reality itself. Skeptics scoff, but for long-distance lovers, for the lonely, for the curious, this is no small revolution. And as AI voices grow more lifelike, the question arises, is chatting with a synthetic partner a betrayal? Customs lag behind technology, scrambling to answer questions no generation has faced before. At the same time, old customs persist. Stubbornly, in many communities, marriage remains the central expectation. Virginity prize LGBTQI identities denied. Religious institutions still preach abstinence, fidelity, family order. For billions, these frameworks remain guiding stars. The clash between traditional and modern customs grows sharper, played out in courts, elections, and dinner tables. Parents gasp at hookup culture. Children roll their eyes at arranged marriages. Customs diverge not just across continents, but across generations under the same roof. Globalization spreads influence unevenly. A K-pop idol flashes a bit of midriff, and millions argue online about whether it's sexualization or harmless style. Bollywood films cautiously push boundaries of intimacy on screen. African Afrobeats videos mix tradition and provocation. Customs once firmly regional now blur as teenagers in Nairobi, Seoul, and Toronto consume the same TikTok trends. Sexuality has never been more global. But freedom has consequences. Studies show rising loneliness, declining marriage rates, and fewer children in many nations. Some blame hookup culture, others economic pressure, others social media's illusion of endless choice. Custom itself is shifting from marriage as default to marriage as option. For the first time in millennia, entire generations may prioritize self-fulfillment over family continuation. Demographers fret, individuals shrug, customs evolve at human pace, but politics races to catch up. And yet, love endures. Couples still hold hands at train stations, still text made at home safe, still argue about dishes. Technology doesn't erase tenderness, it just reframes it. Behind every swipe, meme, and hashtag lies the same longing that moved Homo erectus to sit by a fire 1 million years ago. Connection, safety, warmth. One more joke for you. Imagine 2050 dating apps, half cyborg, fluent in 3 programming languages, looking for partner who won't let ChatGPT write their vows. Swipe right if you enjoy solar-powered picnics. As you close your eyes, you hear the hum of servers, the ping of messages, the chatter of endless debates. Sexual customs today are dazzling, overwhelming, contradictory, liberating for some, suffocating for others. But the common thread is undeniable. Humanity is still negotiating how to balance desire and duty, freedom and commitment, joy and fear. The story isn't finished. Customs are rewriting themselves daily, and as you drift into sleep in this present moment, you realize you are not only listening to history, you are living it. The first thing you notice is the debate, loud, relentless, global. Politicians argue about gender rights, religious leaders warn of collapse, activists march for inclusion. A single law passed in one nation sparks outrage in another. Customs, once local and slow-moving, now evolve at internet speed. What once took centuries, monogamy spreading, marriage codified, chastity invented, now shifts in weeks with a viral video or court ruling. This acceleration is exhilarating and terrifying. Take consent, for example. Only a decade ago, much of the world still treated harassment as minor misbehavior. Today, conversations about boundaries, trauma, and power dominate schools, workplaces, and relationships. Tomorrow, perhaps consent will be taught as fluently as math. Children may grow up rehearsing not only multiplication tables, but also how to communicate clearly about touch and respect. Imagine a future where misunderstanding becomes rare, not because desire changes, but because customs finally catch up to honesty. Then there is technology. Already, AI partners chat late into the night, soothing lonely souls, virtual reality couples stroll beaches continents apart, sex toys hum in sync across oceans. This is only the beginning. You can picture a future where intimacy with machines becomes normal, where some choose robot companions as partners, not substitutes. Will this free people from loneliness, or deepen isolation? Will marriage vows extend to synthetic spouses? Customs will have to decide. And what about reproduction? Already, science is prying apart sex from conception. IVF, surrogacy, and genetic editing push further each year. Soon children may be born without traditional intercourse at all. Some predict ectogenesis, artificial wombs allowing anyone, regardless of gender, to have children. Imagine customs when pregnancy is optional for women, when family is redefined beyond biology. The jealousy, inheritance, and control that once drove sexual customs may lose their grip, or perhaps new forms of control will emerge. Who owns the lab? Who controls the embryo? The stakes are immense. The environment, too, shapes desire. Climate change disrupts homes, jobs, security. In unstable worlds, fertility often drops. People hesitate to raise children in uncertainty. Already in 2024, nations worry about declining birth rates. Governments launch campaigns urging couples to have more babies, sometimes offering money, housing, even medals. Customs may swing back toward duty. Sex not only as pleasure or bond, but as national responsibility. Imagine love and intimacy entangled with patriotism, as they once were in ancient shrines and royal courts. Globalization ensures no custom remains isolated. African polygyny, South Asian arranged marriages, East Asian matchmaking apps, Western hookup culture, they all collide online. A teenager in Lagos might swipe on Tinder, attend a church service warning against premarital sex, and watch K-dramas celebrating chaste romance all in the same week. Customs overlap, contradict, blend. The world becomes a patchwork quilt of desires, stitched by Wi-Fi. A joke for you: imagine a 2050 dating profile, bioengineered for 20-year lifespan, emotionally available, carbon neutral, seeking partner to split rent in lunar colony. Swipe right if you've had your oxygen ration today. But customs are not only about novelty, they are about endurance. Some will never vanish. Pair bonds, whether monogamous, polyamorous, or something new, persist because humans crave connection. Rituals of flirtation, whether ochre paint or emojis, endure because attraction is as much performance as biology. Jealousy, heartbreak, tenderness, all will outlive apps and pills. Customs mutate, but their roots remain ancient. Still, the challenges are stark. The digital archive of intimacy means mistakes live forever. A message, a photo, a video, once shared, impossible to erase. Future customs must grapple with privacy, forgiveness, and digital ghosts of past relationships. Will tomorrow's lovers scroll through each other's entire online history before a first kiss, or will cultures adapt new rituals of forgetting, digital forgiveness, embedded into code? There is also equity. As science enables more control over bodies, who gets access? Wealthy couples may design children, enjoy advanced contraceptives, hire surrogates. Poorer couples may struggle with outdated methods. Customs could diverge, not just by culture but by class. Two parallel sexual worlds, one empowered by biotech, the other constrained by scarcity. And politics, always politics. Already, debates rage about abortion, LGBTQ+ rights, sex education. In the future, some societies may liberalize further, celebrating plural marriages, gender fluidity, AI partnerships. Others may clamp down, enforcing chastity laws, restricting contraception, punishing non-conformity. Customs will fracture, not unify. The world may split into zones of freedom and zones of repression, with desire itself crossing borders like contraband. You lean back, hearing echoes of the entire journey, the fire-lit laughter of Homo erectus guarding mates, the ochre-painted dances of hunter-gatherers, the clay tablets of Mesopotamia punishing adultery, the Egyptian poems whispering of stolen kisses, the Greek symposia, Roman brothels, Indian manuals, Chinese concubines, Hebrew laws, Christian vows, Islamic contracts, medieval confessions, African trial marriages.